Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
The first rays of the sun seeped into the room, sneaking past the partially closed curtain, and brushed Diana's cheek. A tickle in her nose made her scrunch her face in her sleep and stretch. She opened her eyes, yawned sweetly, and patted the spot beside her, but Paco was already gone. He disappeared before dawn once again, without even waking her. Lately, Paco had been swamped with work. Their office was in a flurry with large projects underway. He was virtually living there, coming home late, sleeping over, and then heading back to his beloved job. Diana slipped on her robe and walked into the kitchen. She had prepared breakfast for her husband the night before, but the stuffed pancakes sat untouched. He's only had his coffee again. Oh, Paco, Diana sighed, he's working himself into the ground. She'd always tried to wake up and see her husband off in the morning, but she had overslept this particular morning. He had apparently decided not to wake her. At least she'd prepared his breakfast the night before, even though he hadn't even tried it. Well, at least she knew Viola would definitely have breakfast. Peeking into the children's room, Diana saw her 10-year-old daughter, Viola, fast asleep, clutching her teddy bear. Diana smiled. She looked so sweet, it felt a shame to wake her. Let her sleep a little longer. Diana returned to the kitchen, put the pancakes in the microwave, poured some milk into a pan, and turned on the gas. For a moment she was lost in thought, reflecting on how her mornings had been the same for many years now. Her husband always rushing off to work, her getting Viola ready earlier for kindergarten, now for school, and always in the kitchen. Yes, she was a housewife now. Yet, 12 years ago, everything was different, and she had envisioned a different future for herself. The milk in the pan started to froth, the bubbly foam rising up. Diana snapped out of her reverie, even shook her head. Enough with these memories, it was time to make cocoa. A few minutes later, a chocolatey aroma wafted through the kitchen. The pancakes were warmed through, breakfast was ready. Diana glanced anxiously at the clock. It was already 7:30, time to wake Viola. "Sweetie, time to wake up," she called into the children's room. "Breakfast is ready." 5 more minutes, Viola mumbled sleepily, hugging her teddy bear tighter. 1 more minute, Diana firmly replied. "Come on, open your eyes and head to the bathroom." Viola sighed heavily, then sat up on her bed. "Mom, I had such a dream," she said, yawning, "like we moved to the countryside. We had this huge, beautiful cottage, it was like a palace, and I was wandering around. There was something else, I don't remember, you woke me up." "I'm sorry, my darling," Diana smiled, "next time, you can definitely finish your dream." Always busy with you," Viola grumbled, padding barefoot into the bathroom. "Either you have homework, school, or music lessons. No time to live, not in dreams nor in reality." "Your slippers are in the bathroom," Diana giggled in reply. An hour later, she was already seeing her daughter off to school. Conveniently, it was just across the street. After giving her daughter a farewell kiss, Diana decided to take a stroll around the city, taking her camera along. Her path led her to the park that day. It was spring. The perfect time when all living things recall the time to bloom and emit sweet fragrances, delighting the world with their vibrant colors. The apple trees in the park were dazzlingly beautiful in their snowy attire. The lilac drew attention, the eye could not tear itself away from its floral display. Diana loved photographing both nature and people. How she adored this pastime. At some point, she decided to take a little break and enjoy the surrounding reality. She sat on a bench, closed her eyes. Somewhere nearby in the bushes, birds were cheerfully chirping. "Lady, are you a photographer?" she heard a thin little voice. Surprised, Diana opened her eyes and saw a 5-year-old boy standing by the bench. "No, little one, I just take pictures for fun," she replied. "Why?" The boy curiously raised his eyebrows. "What do you need these photos for?" "Just for the mood." The child nodded understandingly. Such a lovely child, Diana thought to herself. "Let me take a picture of you," she offered. "Who are you here with?" I'm alone, the boy replied. How come alone? Why? Where's your mother? Mom? Mom's in heaven. Dad's at work. I'm with Grandma now. She sent me to the store for bread. And you go alone? What's the big deal? The boy shrugged. Oh, I've been chatting with you for too long. He amusingly waved his hands and ran off to the grocery store nearby. Diana watched him go. It was such a pity. Such a small boy, and already without a mother, so independent. Diana shook her head. But still, it's not right that he's running around alone. When he's on his way back, she'll definitely walk him home. She suddenly felt a strong urge to help this unfamiliar child in some way. While keeping an eye on the store's door, Diana took a few more shots. Soon, the boy came out of the store with a loaf of bread and hopped along the path. His fair, wavy hair was lightly ruffled by the warm wind. He was smiling so carefree, hopping along and clutching the loaf of bread to his chest, that Diana couldn't resist taking a picture of him. It turned out to be a great shot. Lady, did you click me? The boy asked as he ran up to Diana. Yep, she nodded and showed him the photo on the display. Do you like it? It's okay. He nodded a bit restrainedly and shyly looked at Diana. Can you make me a photo card? I can, Diana smiled. Next time we meet, I'll give you a picture. But now, let me walk you home. My name is Aunt Diana. And my name is Pablo, he replied with a smile. I live over there. He pointed to a humble, old 5-story building, its roof just visible from the park. And I live over there, Diana pointed towards the newly constructed apartment complex. You live in a nice building, Pablo appraised. I've never seen you around here before. We just moved here with my dad to live with my grandma. He's always at work, and I'm with Grandma. There's no room for me in the kindergarten. Engaged in their lighthearted chat, they arrived at the 5-story building. Diana promised to return in a couple of days with the picture for the boy, who in return promised to be there. Walking back home, Diana found herself reflecting. Life can be so unjust sometimes. Pablo was such a nice and wonderful boy, yet life seemed to have dealt him a tough hand. Motherless, with a perpetually busy father, and probably an ill grandmother. Diana's own story came to mind. After her parents died in an accident, her grandmother Olivia did everything she could to ensure Diana grew up to be a decent human being. She insisted that Diana attend art school after high school because she was so talented at drawing. But upon graduation, Diana became more interested in photography than in portraits and still lives. Soon, her work caught the attention of a trendy magazine, and she was invited to work for them, becoming a photojournalist. One day, she was asked to photograph a young, successful businessman. After a successful photo session, the businessman suddenly invited her on a romantic date, and Diana did not refuse. That's how her romance with Paco began. She was over the moon with joy. He was wealthy, handsome, and caring. When Paco proposed to her, Diana didn't hesitate for a moment. Of course, she wanted to be his wife. But Olivia didn't share her granddaughter's excitement. Oh, Diana, there's something slippery about this Paco, the old woman had noted. Maybe you shouldn't rush. Maybe you should date him a bit more. Grandma, Diana had laughed. Paco is not slippery. He's the best in the world. Oh, I don't know, Olivia sighed. A week before the wedding, Olivia passed away. Diana wanted to call off the wedding, but Paco insisted on going ahead. Guests were invited, the restaurant was paid for. Of course, it was sad about Olivia, but she was already over 70. Diana listened to her future husband then and continued to do so afterwards. At first, Paco insisted Diana stop seeing her art school friends. It wasn't difficult, they hardly ever saw each other anyway. But then, he demanded that Diana quit her job. She didn't want to, but she was already 3 months pregnant. So, she didn't hesitate too much. She would take care of her home and her husband. When Viola came along, Diana completely forgot about work. And all these years, Diana's world shrank to the size of their apartment, a good two-story apartment with excellent renovations and fine furniture. What else could she need? She had it all: a child, a husband, and prosperity. Yes, Paco earned well as the CEO of a trading company. But over the years, Diana grew restless. She wanted to break free from the golden cage, if not forever, at least for a few hours. She even dreamed of returning to the magazine, but when Paco learned about her aspirations, he objected. "My wife will stay at home," he declared. "Why would you want to bother? Is there not enough money?" "It's sufficient," Diana mildly protested, "but I want to fulfill myself and my profession. I just cook, clean, and go shopping." "But what about Viola? If you start working, the child will be left on her own all day." "Diana, that's sheer recklessness. A woman is a mother, a wife first and foremost." "No, I oppose your work." Diana realized she couldn't change her husband's mind and decided to forget her dreams. Only occasionally would she go out with her camera, for the sake of her soul, like that time when she met the funny little Pablo, wise beyond his years. 2 days later, as promised, she was in the park with photos of the boy. He didn't keep her waiting, appearing with a spring in his step and a beaming smile. "Aunt Diana, you came?" he joyfully cried as he ran up to her. "Of course, I came, I promised," and Diana handed him the photos. "Oh, they're so good," the boy exclaimed. "Aunt Diana, you're a professional." "A professional?" Diana smiled sadly. "Are you going to the store again today?" "No, I'm going to the pharmacy," the boy sighed. "Grandma got sick, I need to buy medicine." "Will they sell it to you?" "I don't know," the boy looked at Diana uncertainly. "Let me help you," she guessed. "What medicine do you need?" The boy timidly handed over a list of medicines and some money. "Keep this." Diana motioned to the money. "But how about the medicine?" "It's pennies," Diana reassured. Of course, this was not quite the case, but she wanted to support the boy. It was clear that he lived simply, if not poorly, with his grandmother and father. The boy was dressed in all old clothes, albeit clean. She walked him home again from the pharmacy. The next day, when Diana was returning home with Viola, she met Pablo in the park with a tall, sullen man. He was around 40. Tired, slightly graying. It was clear that life had not spared him. "Dad," Pablo shouted upon seeing Diana, "this is the lady." And the boy started running towards her, but the man held him back, grabbing his hand. "So it was you who photographed my son and bought my mother's medicine?" he asked grimly. "Yes, I." Diana faltered. "May I ask, why my child? I see you have a daughter." "We just made friends with your son and I wanted to do something nice for him." "Please refrain from such actions in the future," the man grumbled and walked away, leading Pablo by the hand. Pablo kept glancing back, his eyes full of guilt as they fell upon Diana. It was clear that he was on the brink of tears, but Diana was unable to catch up with him and provide comfort. The man was so disgruntled. Indeed, why would she need this boy? His father was right, she was a stranger to him. "Mama, who was that?" Viola asked, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "Oh, just a boy," Diana responded. "Let's head home, I made a pie. Your favorite, with berries." And there at home, watching her daughter blissfully gobble down another slice of the pie, Diana finally found some peace. She needed to put this event behind her. After all, no good deed goes unpunished. But Diana, even afraid to admit it to herself, wondered why she felt such an unexpected pull towards the blonde-haired boy. He reminded her of herself in some ways, but there was something else. 5 years ago, she had lost a child during childbirth. It was her and Paco's son. It was her second pregnancy, and everything seemed to be fine, but something went horribly wrong in the delivery room. The baby was born extremely weak. The doctors said it was due to birth trauma. If he survived, he would be mentally delayed. They suggested she sign the renouncement papers. Diana was, of course, against it, but Paco persuaded her otherwise. Diana, we'll be torturing ourselves and him. Let's sign the papers, then we can have a normal child. This one, he won't survive anyway. Hearing these words, Diana had a breakdown. She was barely consoled. The following morning, she was informed that the baby didn't make it. Diana fell into a severe depression due to the grief. She spent another month in the hospital. She never got to see her baby. Paco buried Hugo, as Diana had named him. Every year, Diana would visit his tiny grave. God didn't bless her and Paco with any more children. Viola was all they had. And now, upon seeing Pablo, Diana found herself instinctively drawn to him, as if he were her own son. That evening, she told her husband about the boy and his father. Paco listened, his brow furrowing. I never understood your need to be kind to everyone. Why do you need this kid? You have a daughter at home, chores to do, and you spend your time wandering around parks, he grumbled. Paco, I go to the parks, as you put it, because my soul yearns for my camera. I'm drawn to it. It would be better if you were drawn to a vacuum cleaner or an oven. Are you implying that I'm a poor housekeeper? Diana countered, offended. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying your place is at home. But you run around like a little girl, camera in hand, hiding in the bushes. Paco, I just wanted to share something with you. That man attacked me out of nowhere. He didn't attack enough. That evening they had a big fight. Diana shouted that Paco had become incredibly audacious. He didn't see her as an individual, only a housewife. Paco wasn't one to hold back his words either. He retorted that if she married a serious man, she shouldn't wander around town. In the end, Paco left and slammed the door. Viola, who had heard everything, finally peeked out of her room and went to her mother. She hugged her and even wiped away the few tears that trickled down her face. Mommy, don't cry, her daughter whispered. You're the best and your photos are the best. By the way, our homeroom teacher said we need a photographer for our graduation. Could you do it? Yes, of course, Diana smiled, collecting herself. Francisca Hernandez already called me. You will have an excellent photo session. Viola was finishing 4th grade. Diana found herself pondering that in a couple of years, Hugo would have started school. A pang of pain clenched her heart again. Diana was already asleep when Paco returned. Their daughter, too. He peeked into the child's bedroom, then quietly headed to the living room, picked up his phone, and made a call. He had a conversation, then sat by the open window smoking. Something serious was on his mind, something was troubling him. In the morning, Paco left early as usual. Diana, after taking her daughter to school, returned home to find her phone on the living room couch. Paco had forgotten it. How could he be without a phone? Diana decided to take it to his office, and on the way, she couldn't resist and rummaged through his messages and contacts. Nothing interesting, but she didn't expect anything different. Diana knew that Paco loved her. Then she read one strange message. See you tomorrow at the cafe near the tower at 10 p.m. The message had arrived late at night from an unknown number. Who had arranged a meeting with Paco? It didn't seem like work, it was too late. Diana decided that Paco would tell her everything himself. Paco's secretary, seeing Diana, smiled and offered coffee. Our competitors are here with him right now, she whispered. They're looking for, let's say, points of contact. Okay, I'll wait, Diana nodded. She had to wait for about an hour. At first, there was silence in the office, then raised voices could be heard. In short, the diplomatic conversation didn't work out, and the competitors left, slamming the door. Diana walked into the office to see her husband, who looked irritated and flushed. What are you doing here? He asked, raising his eyebrows in surprise. You forgot your phone, Diana said softly. I figured you'd need it during the day. Yes, everything is upside down today. I didn't even notice that I left my phone at home. Will you be able to come home a bit earlier today? I wanted to prepare something special. No, I'm sorry. I have a lot of work. But you're not going to be resolving them until nighttime, are you? Paco said nothing, just lowered his eyes and shook his head. The first seed of doubt crept into Diana's heart. Could her husband really be cheating on her? She couldn't stop thinking about that SMS, and it suddenly seemed as if the puzzle in Diana's mind was complete. Her husband's late arrivals home had become the norm, he left early, and his recent irritation hinted at something hidden from her. That was it, he must have a mistress. Diana decided to tell her husband that evening. She went to the very cafe mentioned in the text message and chose a table far away from the entrance. There was a large aquarium that shielded Diana from prying eyes, yet provided her with an excellent vantage point. Diana waited. Somehow, she knew it was her immediately. A tall, slender brunette entered the cafe. She glanced around with a contemptuous air before taking a seat by the window. Soon, Paco walked in, and yes, he made his way to the brunette. Diana watched them, all the while fighting the urge to get up, rush over to them, slap her husband in the face, and yank the hair of this brazen hussy. But she held back. Paco smiled at the brunette and sat down beside her. Diana couldn't hear their conversation as she only saw Paco's back. The woman flashed a sickly sweet smile at him. Diana's heart pounded, tears welling up in her eyes. What would he say if she approached them right now? But then Diana felt her legs turn to jelly. She didn't have the strength to stand. So she decided to call him instead. The phone rang, but Paco dropped the call, so engrossed was he in his conversation with the brunette. But Diana dialed again. Yes, darling. Did you want something? He asked, a hint of annoyance in his voice. Hi Paco, Diana replied as softly as she could. Where are you now? Diana, I'm in a meeting. It's not a good time. I'll be late. He hung up, but Diana still held the phone to her ear. He'd be late, he was in a meeting. What a liar he was, and she started crying. Diana had been sure for years that Paco loved her. They had been through so much together, and now he dared to act like this. Why? Because she gave him the best years of her life? Because she gave up her dream and quit her job at the magazine? Diana kept thinking about what to do next. But then the brunette got up and headed for the exit, Paco following close behind her. Through the window, Diana watched as her husband opened the car door for the woman as she smiled at him, and he replied, also with a smile. Traitor! Diana whispered, wiping her tears away angrily. You will regret this. Her heart was filled with the desire for revenge. She didn't know how yet, but she was sure she would make her husband pay for this insult. A public confrontation would be too simple. After all, what had she really seen? Just her husband sitting in a cafe with another woman. He would undoubtedly be able to explain it away. He'd claim it was a business meeting, and it didn't matter that it was 11 o'clock at night, or that they were smiling at each other. Yes, he could lie convincingly, of this Diana was now certain. She felt a storm raging within her. So while she was at home making him soup and ironing his shirts, he was out entertaining various women, telling her to stay home. What a convenient arrangement he had. Diana decided to catch him red-handed and then throw all the accusations in his face. She bolted out of the cafe and managed to hail a ride. Follow that blue Audi, she commanded to the driver of an old Lada. Audi it is, the elderly man nodded. Keeping tabs on someone or trying to catch up? Probably the former. Your husband? My husband. The driver shook his head and smoothly switched lanes. Surprisingly, the old car moved swiftly and confidently, with Paco's car flitting ahead. Diana couldn't figure out where her husband was heading. There were no hotels in this part of town. Could he be going to this woman's place? He had the audacity. Before long, Paco's car veered into a side street and parked outside a maternity hospital. Diana's heart tightened. This was where she had given birth to their son Hugo. The woman got out of the car, waved at Paco, and ascended the steps with ease. So, she works here, Diana muttered. Let's get out of here. Please take the scenic route. I want to be home before my husband. The old driver nodded understandingly. Diana had already changed into her home clothes when the front door's lock clicked. As if nothing had happened, Paco walked into the house. "Hi, honey," he smiled. "I'm so tired today, it's been a long day. Are you going to feed me?" "Whatever you find in the fridge, you can eat," Diana replied indifferently, then headed to her daughter's room. She decided to sleep with her tonight. She couldn't bear to look at Paco. Paco watched her, puzzled, but didn't say a word. The next morning, Diana purposely lay still, waiting for him to leave for work. Then she got up and woke their daughter. "Rise and shine, sleepyhead," she said cheerily. "Only 1 week of school left." "That's right," the girl stretched, smiling. "And how great is it that Dad will be on vacation? Where are we going this year?" "Dad's been quiet about it." "I don't want to go to the beach." "Maybe the mountains?" "Maybe the mountains," Diana responded absently. "But for now, let's get ready for school. We need to sort out the details of the photo shoot today. Your graduation is on Friday." The preparation for their daughter's celebration kept them busy. Paco was still coming home late from work. Diana kept quiet, mulling over the situation. She decided not to act hastily, but seeing Paco was difficult, especially picturing him with someone else. Of course, Paco didn't make it to their 4th grader's graduation, citing his workload. Viola pouted a little, but Diana arranged such a delightful photo shoot that the girl forgot about her father's absence. "The important thing is you were there," Viola said on their way home. "Mom, you're wonderful." "Thank you, sweetheart," Diana smiled, but her smile froze on her face. She saw the same brunette exiting their apartment building. Could she have been in their apartment? If Paco was home, then she must have been. And indeed, the door was opened by Paco. He was wearing a robe, having just showered. "Hello, my girls," he smiled. "You won't believe this, but I was in an accident today." "An accident?" Viola exclaimed in horror. "No, it wasn't in the car. At work, the secretary spilled coffee on me. She twisted her ankle, and the cup fell right onto my pristine white shirt. Diana, I'm sorry. But I don't know if you'll be able to clean it." "Just throw it away," Diana replied indifferently, her thoughts consumed by that brunette. "How long have you been home?" "Only about 10 minutes. Figured I'd take a quick shower since things are a mess." Diana merely smiled, not adding anything else. She picked up the ruined shirt and, in front of her surprised husband, threw it into the trash. "Shouldn't we at least try to clean it?" "It's a good shirt," Paco stammered, but Diana seemed to not hear him. She was still thinking about that brunette. How audacious Paco had become, bringing his mistress home. Well then, she would hunt them down. Conveniently, Viola had planned to visit her friend for a few hours that day, where adults would supervise. After dropping her daughter off, Diana headed to her husband's office, hiring another cab. The rest of the day passed without incident. Paco did not leave his office. At 7, he left the building and dialed a number. "Yes," Diana heard Paco's voice. "Marta, we've already met and I can't see you so often, especially since I think Diana suspects something." "Yes, I understand this isn't interesting for you, but I have a wife and daughter." After hearing something in response, Paco hung up the phone with irritation and got into his car. Diana followed him, and once again, Paco ended up at the same cafe. Diana managed to photograph her husband with the brunette. There they were, the woman giving Paco a peck on the cheek, then sitting together at a table. This time, Diana clearly saw there was more than business between them. But who was she? Diana didn't know her. She decided to visit the house where Paco had dropped the woman off the first time. The following day, she was at the hospital. "What do you want from our Marta?" the chief doctor asked, looking at the photo of the woman resting her hand on Paco's shoulder. "I want her to leave the man sitting next to her alone," replied Diana. "He's my husband, and I love him. But I can see he's completely head over heels for your Marta. Have you spoken to your husband?" "No, it's too hard. I don't know where to start. I don't want to lose him, but at the same time, I can't bear living like this any longer. I thought perhaps you, as her employer, could influence your employee. Yes, I'll do my best, the doctor nodded, looking closely at Diana, then again at the photograph. You know, I think I've seen you before. You and your husband. Yes, I'm Diana Sans. My child passed away in your clinic 5 years ago. I would never have set foot here again, but your employee is acting more than provocatively. Sans. The chief doctor's face changed as he remembered. Yes, I recall. I'm sorry for what happened. Don't worry about Marta, she's a good pediatric nurse. But a bit too amorous, it seems. If she's having an affair with your husband, I'll put her in her place swiftly. I doubt it, of course, Diana smiled, but at least try. As Diana left the clinic, memories washed over her, and she froze. Her heart ached once again. 5 years ago, she had felt very unwell here, and now she was experiencing no better emotions. Why had she come here at all, hoping that they could somehow stop this insolent nurse? And Paco, how could she reach him? Diana turned a corner and sat on a bench near the building, closing her eyes. Then she heard a woman's voice from an open window nearby. Hello, Paco, Diana heard. Yes, it's me. Listen, your wife came by. Apparently, she decided that we're having an affair. Diana cautiously peeked out the window and spotted Marta. She was half-turned, gazing at herself in the mirror while talking on the phone. Technically, all these years, you know I wouldn't mind being involved with you. But for some reason, you resist. Why is that? Paco was becoming agitated. Paco, calm down, Diana heard, and she recoiled, pressing herself against the wall. It meant Paco was not cheating on her. It was all in her head. Actually, what had she seen? Just Marta pecking Paco on the cheek yesterday. Diana even felt relieved. Her husband loved only her. But what she heard next literally pinned her against the wall. Paco, your Diana went to see the chief physician. He recognized her, then yelled at me. Why? Because we're talking to each other. What if she suspects everything? Yes, she believes your son is dead, but what if hypothetically she gets such an idea? Paco was shouting into the phone. Marta was justifying herself, but Diana didn't listen anymore. Her vision suddenly blurred. What did Marta say? That her son is alive? How could it be? Paco himself had buried him. He looked into her eyes and said their son was no more. Her Hugo. Diana staggered back to the bench where she remained seated. Suddenly, she felt a touch on her shoulder. Diana lifted her head. An elderly woman in a white coat, apparently a nurse, stood next to her. Dear, are you feeling unwell? The old woman asked kindly. Should I call a doctor? No, thank you, no need. Diana shook her head. A doctor can't help me. Did you have some sort of misfortune? Yes, I just realized that I've been betrayed by the person I love. Did your husband stray? It's okay, he'll come back. All men are like cables. Once they've had their fun, they come back home to their wives and children. If only that was the main problem. Diana looked into the old woman's face. She seemed kind. Suddenly, an idea struck her. Excuse me, have you been working in this maternity hospital for a long time? Yes, for many years. I see you're a good person. I need to know something. But it's a long story. Can you spare me half an hour? My name is Diana, and yours? Roquelia Castro, or better, call me Grandma Roquelia. I just finished my shift. I just need to take off my coat. The nurse nodded in response. Soon, they both left the hospital courtyard. Diana suggested they sit in a cafe, and there she told her everything she had heard from the open window. You say your last name is Sans? Grandma Roquelia repeated as if remembering something. Were you here 5 years ago? I remember a woman. It was probably you. I forgot her last name. Yes, it was a complicated case then. All the doctors were very worried. There was a problem with the baby because of their fault. They should have performed a C-section, but they made her give birth naturally. Something was wrong with the baby, but he was definitely alive. I myself heard that the chief physician said that the baby should be transferred to the infant home. His parents had abandoned him, and I was surprised at the time, wondering why they abandoned him. The baby seemed perfectly normal from the outside, but he was a crybaby. And I am certain there were no fatal cases. Grandma Rokelia, could you be mixing up something? I'm not mistaken about anything. Over the last 5 years, all the babies in our maternity ward have survived. There were some frail little ones, some mothers in critical condition, but we nursed all of them back to health. So, it turns out, my Hugo is alive, and that Marta was indeed talking about my baby. That means she's involved in this, as well as the head doctor and Paco. Oh dear God, Paco. So, he's been hiding the truth from me all these years. That must be why he's been communicating with this Marta. Oh, this Marta. Don't let her get to you. As for the baby, Diana, I'll find out, I promise. Don't tell your husband anything yet. My daughter works at the orphanage, has been there for a long time. She might be able to tell you something about your little one. But I don't know anything about him, Diana sobbed. All I did was name him Hugo. I don't even know his blood type. But you remember his date of birth, right? Of course. It was September the 5th. Got it. September 5th, 5 years ago. I'll ask my daughter. They exchanged phone numbers and said their goodbyes. Diana walked home, but her legs felt like they were failing her. She couldn't face her husband. There was so much she had to tell him, so many questions she had to ask. But Diana was afraid to hear the whole truth, and what was worse, she had no one to share it with. Paco had driven away all her friends, and she had no relatives. Only her daughter. The thought of Viola gave her a bit of strength. Mommy, Viola ran to meet her in the hallway. Where have you been? I missed you so much. Indeed, where have you been? Paco peeked out from the living room, clearly displeased. I came home and our daughter was alone. There was nothing but sandwiches to eat. Diana didn't respond to her husband. She didn't even look at him. She was lost in her own thoughts. She hugged her daughter and gave her a kiss. Are you hungry, sweetheart? A little, Viola admitted, but I had tea with Daddy, don't worry. I just got home from a friend's house. Sandra and Aunt Maya walked me home. You're my smart girl. I'll make something to eat in a minute. Without a glance at her husband, Diana headed to the kitchen. Diana, what's happening? Paco followed her into the kitchen. Why are you avoiding talking to me? Where have you been all day? Do you really want to know? Diana fixed her gaze intently on her husband. Yes, he held her gaze. I don't understand your tone. Diana wanted to voice all her suspicions, but held back at the last moment. It wasn't the time yet. Paco, I think you're cheating on me, she blurted out suddenly. Me? Paco choked, then laughed. Diana, have you been watching too many soap operas? I'm working hard all day to ensure that you and Viola have the best of everything. When would I have time to cheat? Then who is this Marta? Paco's face briefly faltered, then he adopted a surprised expression as if trying to recall. Which Marta? The brunette, the one who works as a nurse. Ah, Marta. She's a classmate of mine. Why are you asking about her? I saw you two at a cafe yesterday. Paco's cheeks flushed and he visibly tensed, but quickly regained composure. Yes, she did arrange a meeting with me yesterday. Our class is planning a reunion this summer. She asked me to discuss details about where and how we will celebrate. Paco was improvising, and Diana knew it. But she pretended to believe him. You're not lying to me, are you? Why would I, my love? Paco smiled warmly. In my heart, there's only you. And he embraced his wife, kissing her. Diana wanted to push him away, to shout at him, to ask where their son was, but she held back with all her strength and simply rested her head on his shoulder. Then she pulled away and began to prepare dinner. "Diana, is the issue resolved?" he asked jovially. "Yes, darling." Diana even managed to smile back at him, though her heart ached. She could only think of one thing: would Grandma Rokelia discover anything or not? That night, she dreamt. She was walking through a forest when suddenly a wolf stepped out from the bushes. Diana froze for a moment and looked into the eyes of the beast, when suddenly a child's cry echoed from a distance. Diana jolted and the wolf bolted in the direction of the cry. She ran after it. In a clearing, a little boy sat, wiping his tears. He looked around helplessly. "Mommy," he cried out, seeing Diana. He got up and ran towards her, but the wolf was faster. The beast grabbed the boy by his shirt and pulled him away. "No, no!" Diana screamed. "Don't touch him, let him go." She ran after the wolf, shouting and crying. The wolf paused for a second, looked back at her, and then Diana realized that it wasn't a wolf, but Paco. And then, in a moment, they disappeared into the mist, like a dissipating fog. "Give him back! Give him back!" Diana repeated as she began to tremble. She woke up to Paco shaking her by the shoulder. "Diana, Diana, what's wrong?" Paco leaned over her. "Wake up." She opened her eyes. Her head ached, her heart pounded. A sticky, cold sweat broke out on her forehead, and her teeth hurt from clenching her jaw. "What nightmare?" Paco looked into her eyes. "You screamed so terribly." "Yes, a terrible dream," she breathed. "You were calling out for someone, I couldn't understand who. I dreamed of our son." "Diana, my dear. So much time has passed." "Shoo, calm down, it's all over, it was only a dream." Paco pulled her to him, lulling her like a child. Diana quieted, calming down a bit. Maybe it was all in her imagination. Everything she learned yesterday, just a coincidence. But she herself heard the conversation between Paco and that Marta. Diana pulled away from Paco. "It's okay, I'll go back to sleep," she said, pulling the blanket over her head and turning away from her husband. Soon he lay down next to her, embracing her. Diana wanted to throw off his hateful hand, but she didn't make a move. Let him sleep. She stayed awake till morning, without sleep or thought. Her mind was as if empty. In the morning, Paco kissed her and went to work. Viola was asleep in her room, and Diana dozed off too. She was awakened by a phone call. It was Grandma Rokelia. "Diana, how are you?" the woman asked, as if they had known each other for 1,000 years. "Why does your voice sound like that?" "I was still sleeping. It's already 11 o'clock. "I didn't sleep well all night," Diana replied in a muffled voice. "All sorts of thoughts were going through my head." "All right, get a grip. I've found out something." "What?" Diana sat up abruptly in bed. "Tell me. This isn't a conversation for over the phone. Come to me, in about 3 hours, my daughter will be here. She has something to tell you." Diana immediately jumped out of bed and began to gather frantically. Then she sat down and calmed herself. She still had some time. She went to the kitchen and made lunch. Soon, Viola woke up. "Mom, what's that delicious smell?" asked the little girl, rubbing her eyes. "I made your favorite red soup," Diana smiled, referring to gazpacho. "Go wash up, have something to eat, and then we'll go." "Where?" The girl was surprised. "To a very kind grandmother. I met her recently." "You'll sit quietly there, and I'll talk to her daughter." "About what?" "Just adult stuff." Diana kissed her daughter, sighed, and pondered. What truth awaits her there? Maybe she shouldn't take her daughter along, but she can't leave her home alone either. They would go together. Soon she called a taxi and at the appointed time set off to Grandma Rokelia. The woman lived in a private sector, in a small but neat house. It was now all buried in blooming apple trees, lilacs, and bird cherry. Rokelia came out to the porch to greet her guests. "What a lovely place you have." Diana smiled, greeting the hostess. What a grown-up daughter you have, Grandma Rokelia smiled. Hello, young lady. Come with me to the garden, your mother is needed inside for a chat, and will only be in the way there. I need to water the tomatoes and cabbage. Tomatoes? Viola was surprised. Are they already red? What are you talking about, sweetie? These are just tiny sprouts, and in time, they'll bear fruit. Grandma Rokelia took the girl by the hand, and they headed off to the plot. Meanwhile, Diana stepped into the house. A woman around her 50s peeked out from the tiny kitchen. A bit on the heavier side, her hair was gathered in a bun, and she wore glasses. Diana felt slightly intimidated. What a stern daughter Grandma Rokelia had. Hello, the woman nodded. My name is Viviana Castro. My mom told me about your story. Honestly, I don't have the right to disclose such things, but this is a slightly different case. Viviana invited Diana to sit at the table, poured some tea, and began her tale. Exactly 5 years ago, I was appointed as the director of an orphanage. And just then, a newborn was brought in from the maternity hospital, abandoned by his parents. The boy was diagnosed with a severe condition. They thought his brain had been damaged due to difficult birth. There were discussions about transferring him to a specialized institution. But everything kept getting postponed. Time passed, and one day, it became clear that the baby was perfectly healthy. He grew and developed just like any other child. Viviana would watch the boy with sadness, thinking that as a result of a medical mistake, his parents gave up on him so easily. They didn't even fight for him. But it wasn't her place to judge. Soon, Zoe came to work at the orphanage. She was a bit over 30 and immediately became attached to the abandoned child. She soon set a goal to adopt the boy. She and her husband didn't have their own children. They had tried treatments for a long time, but the issue wasn't with her, it was with her husband. They didn't have money for IVF, so they decided to adopt a child. As a result, they managed to take the baby home. I don't know if this is your boy or not, but the maternity hospital matches, and so does the date of birth. I've already mentioned that I don't have the right to disclose all this, but... Viviana paused for a moment, then gathered her courage. Not too long ago, Zoe passed away. Cancer took her in just a few months. Her husband, Miguel, and the boy were left alone. I know they moved in with Miguel's mother. Everything might have been okay, but Miguel started drinking heavily. His mother is sick, and the boy has been left to fend for himself. Wait, Diana exclaimed, suddenly struck by a realization. What is the boy's name? In the orphanage, they named him Pablo. Pablo? Diana shouted. Could it really be him? I don't understand. Viviana looked surprised. Diana hastily told her about her encounter with the boy she had photographed. She pulled out her camera, which she habitually carried everywhere, and found the necessary photo. Is this him? Diana pointed at the image on the camera's screen. I remember him when he was very small, admitted Viviana, but he does look similar, the same fair hair. Yes, it's very likely. Viviana hesitated. She wanted to add that the boy also resembled Diana, but she held back. What if all this was a mistake? Mom, it turns out tomatoes are really small at the start. Viola appeared at the threshold, her face lit up with excitement. I watered them, and Grandma Rokelia said that I can come and help water them. We're coming back here again, aren't we, Mom? Yes, yes. Of course. Diana's body trembled slightly after her conversation with Viviana. Could Pablo really be her son? She looked at Grandma Rokelia. Thank you. I just can't understand one thing. You didn't know me at all, but suddenly you offered to help? Why? It's an old score with the head doctor, Grandma Rokelia said, a sad smile gracing her face. I worked as a midwife in that hospital my entire life, and just before my well-deserved retirement, they accused me of negligence. Supposedly, due to my fault, a woman died. They removed me from work and stripped me of my medical benefits. I wasn't at fault in that situation. The head doctor had operated unsuccessfully then. And no one would listen to me. I ended up working as a janitor. I had to make ends meet somehow. If your story turns out to be true, this head doctor will be kicked out from his high chair." "I see," Diana responded. "Rest assured, if my son is alive, there won't be enough room for everyone involved in this. And that includes the head doctor and my husband." Viola listened carefully to the adults but didn't understand anything. "Mom, who were you talking about when you mentioned a son?" the girl asked on their way home. "Honey," Diana suddenly realized and asked, "I'll tell you everything, just a little later. Just don't tell Dad anything yet. About us visiting and anything you heard, agreed?" "Okay," the girl nodded. Diana realized she had made a mistake discussing the matter in front of her daughter, but it was too late to take it back. Back home, she persuaded Viola to take a short stroll in the park. The girl agreed. Diana was hoping she would see Pablo that day, and as if God heard her prayers. Just as they sat down on a park bench, there he was, running in his usual hop-step manner. "Aunt Diana," he cried joyfully and smiled, "where have you been? Got scared of my dad or something?" "That's needless, he's good, just look stern. Did you know what he did with the picture you gave me?" "What?" Diana tensed up internally. "He framed it and hung it up on the wall in the living room. Grandma liked the picture a lot too. She said that the photographer knows what they're doing." "Thank you," Diana laughed. "This is my daughter Viola." The girl nodded at the boy and looked at her mother, puzzled. "Viola, this is Pablo, a good friend of mine." Her good friend was sniffling nonstop. "Did you catch a cold?" Diana asked with concern. "It's summer outside. Where did you get sick?" "Oh, I ate too much ice cream. Dad got a new job recently. We have money now." The boy smiled brightly. "So, they bought me new jeans." Diana noticed that the boy's shirt was new too, and he was well dressed. "You look great." Diana smiled and pulled out a pack of disposable tissues from her bag. "Here, let me wipe your nose," and she did just that. Pablo hardly had time to react before Diana had already put the used tissue in a separate baggie. They walked a little more together. Diana ran to a pharmacy to buy Pablo some vitamins. Afterward, they escorted the boy home. "He's a nice kid," Viola smiled, "so fair, just like us." "Right, Mom?" "Yes, like us," Diana agreed thoughtfully. "Viola, can you stay home alone for an hour? I have some errands to run. I'll be quick." "Okay, Mom." Diana dropped off her daughter and dashed to a private clinic where they could perform a genetic analysis. The tissue she had used to wipe Pablo's nose was perfect for the test. When she got back home, a furious Paco was waiting for her. "Where have you been again?" he shouted. "Our daughter's been alone." "Diana, what are you doing, and where did you take my daughter today?" "Mom, I spilled the beans," Viola confessed with a guilty whisper. Diana looked at her husband. "Paco, I had some business. I went to visit some old friends." "What kind of friends could you have that I don't know about?" "You have a family. A husband and a child. You should be taking care of the house, but instead, you've not even prepared dinner. It's a mess." "The house is in order," Diana calmly retorted, "and the food's in the fridge. I'll heat it up now." She started towards the kitchen, but Paco grabbed her arm. "What was this about a child you're looking for that Viola mentioned?" "Diana, you must be losing your mind. I'm saner now than I've ever been." She pulled her arm free and replied, "And since you've asked, I'll tell you. Yes, I'm looking for my son. But he's gone." "Diana, come to your senses. You definitely need a doctor. We're going first thing tomorrow. And you're going to pay him to declare me incompetent? What money are you talking about? How much did you pay the head of the maternity ward back then to put our son in an orphanage?" Paco staggered at the accusation. He denied it vehemently, claiming that Diana was making things up. It happened the way it happened. The child didn't survive. But Diana didn't listen, nor did she plan on justifying herself. She had other things on her mind. The DNA test results. She hadn't yet told her husband about it. 10 days of waiting passed. During that time, Diana hardly spoke to Paco. She took walks with her daughter in the park where they'd meet Pablo and have a merry time together. Pablo would tell them about his family. His father, Miguel, worked all day at some computer firm. Diana's heart raced at every coincidence. Pablo's grandmother was nearly immobile, only managing to move a bit around their apartment. His mother, Zoe, was seriously ill. Pablo revealed a lot about his life to Diana as they sat in cafes and strolled around the city. Diana just waited. Finally, the call came from the clinic that the results were ready. Diana went there, her heart in her throat. She was terrified of what they would say. "I don't understand anything, it's anxiety," she confessed to the lab technician who handed her the documents. Diana pored over the numbers, struggling to believe. The results indicate that the person whose biological material was provided has close relatives, as close as a mother and child. Upon hearing this, Diana cried out, then burst into tears. Yes, Pablo was her son. He was her Hugo, whom she'd mourned for so many years. He was alive. That evening, she decided to lay all her cards on the table for her husband. Paco arrived home late as usual, with Viola already asleep. Diana was sitting in the living room, on the sofa. She had a DNA report in her hands. "What are you studying there?" Paco asked bluntly instead of a greeting. Their relationship had been strained these past few days. "I found our son," Diana calmly replied. "He is alive and well." "What nonsense are you spouting now?" Paco exclaimed. "Good Lord, you really need a mental hospital." "You need prison," Diana responded, without raising her voice. "Maybe now you'll tell me how you got rid of our son? You've lied to my face for years. You gave our child up to the orphanage when I was between life and death." Paco suddenly seemed to deflate. He then took the documents from the clinic and read them. "Well, why are you silent?" Diana tugged at his sleeve. "Now, looking into my eyes, tell me that our Hugo is dead. How did you find him?" Paco unexpectedly croaked out. "We searched for him with Marta for almost half a year." "Oh, so you and Marta. Do tell," Diana demanded. "What is there to tell?" Paco shrugged. "When the doctor said that our son would be mentally handicapped, I immediately decided we didn't need all that. To torture ourselves, to make him suffer. Marta worked in the maternity ward as a pediatric nurse. Yes, she was indeed my classmate. I spoke to her, told her you didn't want to give up the baby. She then proposed an option, to pay the head doctor for a death certificate. Everything happened just like that. I relinquished custody while you were unconscious, got the certificate, and buried an empty coffin. Then, the boy was taken to the orphanage. So, while I was mourning him at the maternity ward, he was nearby?" Diana was barely holding back tears. "And you lied to me." "Diana, I wanted the best. Why do we need a disabled child? You decided for me. You deprived me of my son. What difference does it make what he is? I would have loved him anyway. But the most important thing is that he's normal, a good, intelligent child. Doesn't your own heart ache, knowing that your son is growing up somewhere with strangers? I kept track of him all this time. Yes, after a year I learned that he was adopted and seemed to be normal. Yes, I regretted my actions, but what could I do? I decided to forget this story, and I would only find out how he was doing through Marta. But then, the boy's adoptive mother died, and he disappeared with his adoptive father. Marta and I searched for them, but couldn't find them. With Marta," Diana smirked, "she was also driving a wedge between us on the side. Admit it, she was even in our house that time your secretary allegedly spilled coffee on your shirt, wasn't she? I saw Marta near our apartment building, and then you were at home, in a bathrobe." Paco shook his head, unable to admit that Marta had been in their apartment that day. They had met to discuss where to search for the boy and his adoptive father. Paco ran home for a moment to grab some work-related documents, with Marta waiting for him in the car, but then suddenly she followed him up. He opened the door and she embraced him, pressing against him, starting to remove her clothes. It was a temptation, a mistake. Everything happened quickly. Afterwards, Paco started saying that his wife could come home at any moment. Marta smiled understandingly and left. Then Diana arrived. Yes, he had cheated on her, but only once. But he couldn't admit it. Diana, Marta, and I were just looking for the boy, he stubbornly repeated. You talk about him as if he's someone else's. Paco, he is your son. His name is Pablo now. I only have a daughter, Paco raised his voice, and enough of this. Let him grow up in another family. It's all good there, as I understand. Let it be. What's good about that? Diana exclaimed, I won't let this go. I will make sure my son grows up with me. Forget about it, Paco shook his head, I won't allow it, and if you make a fuss, I will divorce you. I'll take Viola. The court will grant me custody. What are you without me? You're nothing, jobless, living off me. You're a zero without me. Is that how you speak now? Diana smirked, weren't you the one who made me like this? But you're mistaken if you think I'm spineless. I'm leaving you anyway, and I'm taking Viola. That night, Diana slept in her daughter's room, though it was hard to call it sleep. She just lay with her eyes closed all night, deep in thought, wondering what she was to do now. She couldn't go on living as before. Paco repulsed her, and she needed to take Pablo back. She wouldn't let Viola go. In the morning, Diana opened her eyes as soon as the front door closed behind her husband. After kissing her sleepy daughter, she cautiously got out of bed and walked over to the window. A new day was dawning, and for Diana, a new life was beginning. She had grown used to the idea that her son was close by. Soon, they would be together. From Pablo's stories, it seemed like he was loved in his adoptive family. His father had been drinking for some time, which was understandable given he had suffered the loss of his wife. Now, it seemed like he was okay. By lunchtime, when Viola was watching a children's TV show in her room, Diana made her decision. Sweetheart, I have to step out for a little while. Can you stay home alone? Diana asked Viola. Her daughter nodded in response. Diana had calculated everything. Paco wouldn't be home for another 7 hours. And Miguel, Pablo's adoptive father, would be home for lunch. They needed to meet and talk. Grabbing the DNA test results, Diana headed for the old 5-story building. Pablo, being a chatty boy, had long ago told her which entrance to use and which apartment to visit. A frail elderly woman on crutches opened the door. Who are you here for? She asked, surprised, squinting at the visitor. I don't recognize you. My name is Diana Sanz, she said. Your grandson and I occasionally meet at the park. Ah, Diana, the woman smiled. Pablo has mentioned you. You took a nice picture. Come in. Pablo ran over to the neighbors. We ran out of salt. Miguel came home for lunch, and I hadn't put enough salt in the soup, and wouldn't you know, the salt shaker's empty. So Miguel is home? Yes, but he's having lunch. I need to speak with him. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but it's really important. My name is Marina Montero. Marina, could you please call Miguel? The old woman shrugged and called out. Son, come here. The tall man appeared from the kitchen, now looking less grim than during their previous encounter. Did you want to talk about Pablo? He asked. Please forgive my rudeness back then, I wasn't in the mood. Of course, you can meet him, I understand you're a good person. Thank you, stammered Diana, but I have another matter to discuss with you. Could we go outside to the yard? Sure, Miguel nodded, checking his watch. I'm sorry for interrupting your lunch, but this is really important. Yes, I've gathered that, Miguel smiled. They ran into Pablo on the staircase landing. Oh, Aunt Diana! The boy exclaimed. Hello, Pablo, Diana almost blurted out my son, but she restrained herself. I came to talk to your dad. About what? The child inquired businesslike. Pablo, what's with the interrogation? Miguel smiled. Head back inside. Your grandma is waiting for that salt. By the way, did you find some? Yes, Pablo answered importantly, pulling a small packet from his pocket, and Luz said there's no need to repay her. Otherwise, we'd fight. She just took a penny, as Grandma instructed. Ah, these superstitions, Diana smiled. Yes, it's the 21st century and we still believe in all this nonsense, Miguel agreed. Who knows, maybe there's something to it. Chatting, they descended and sat down on a bench. Diana was gathering courage. Diana, I have to get to work in half an hour. I work nearby, but we have a strict schedule. Miguel said. Yes, Diana nodded and pulled out some papers. Here. What's this? This might seem absurd, but I'm Pablo's real mother. Miguel looked at Diana with confusion, then glanced at the documents. Diana, feeling anxious, immediately began her explanation, telling everything as it was. Miguel listened to her with his head bowed. I won't ask how you found US, he finally said, but if you try to take Pablo away from me, I won't stay silent. I will go to court. Miguel, understand, I am in shock myself, Diana tried to explain. I don't want any lawsuits, especially considering how my husband is behaving in this situation. I just want to be able to interact with Pablo. What are you going to tell him? That you gave birth to him and abandoned him? He considers another woman to be his mother. Do you understand how this will affect him? I understand everything and I don't know how to make things better. That's why I came to you. Just to talk for now, together we'll find a solution. I believe in it. Together? Are you joking? You discarded a sick child, like an unwanted kitten. And now you've come to your senses. I didn't abandon him. That changes nothing. What do you want, for me to hand Pablo over to you? Why do you need him? You have a daughter, raise her. Especially since, as you say, your husband is not thrilled that his son has been found. I will leave my husband. I won't live with him after everything that happened. That information is irrelevant to me. Don't come to us anymore. And as for Pablo, I forbid you to see him. Miguel stood up decisively and headed for the entrance without looking back, while Diana was left sitting on the bench. She was as if turned to stone. Yes, Miguel can be understood, but who will understand her? 5 years ago, she was lied to and deprived of her child, and now when she suddenly found him, it turns out that she has no rights. Indeed, Pablo considers the deceased woman to be his mother. Diana cried. This is how she suddenly found her son and at the same time cannot get him back. Maybe she should swallow her pride, try to reconcile with Paco for the sake of their son and convince him to return the child. After all, Paco has good lawyers, connections. But as soon as Diana remembered her husband's eyes, remembered how he had lied to her for so many years while watching her visit their son's empty grave while she was suffering, and he stayed silent. No, she would never forgive him for that. Diana slowly walked up to the entrance of the building and saw her husband's car. The next instant, her husband and Viola emerged from the building. Mom, Viola was delighted and was about to run to Diana, but Paco intercepted her. Get in the car. He ordered the girl. What about Mom? I said get in the car. Paco yelled and pushed Viola into the car, then turned to Diana. Did you think you could behave however you please? Who do you think you are? You were supposed to do as I told you. I clearly told you to forget about that boy. And what did you do? You immediately ran to his adoptive father. What, did you cry there, telling him what a bad husband you have? How did you know? And I've been watching you, saw how you were sitting on the bench, how he dismissed you. Anyway, Viola and I are leaving now. I won't tell you where, but make sure your presence is not felt in the apartment in 2 days. I'm divorcing you, and if you obstruct me, I won't let you see our daughter. Do you understand? No. No. You wouldn't dare treat me like this. Diana screamed, bursting into tears. What did I do wrong? You've behaved like a complete scoundrel. You say you've been watching me, But didn't you want to look after your son? He's not my son. Paco cut her off. Viola was crying in the car at this time. Paco got in the car and drove away. Diana started to run after her daughter, but stopped, fell to the asphalt, and broke into uncontrollable sobbing. Her life shattered into tiny pieces. And how could she pick them all up now? A mother indeed, and what a pitiful, miserable one. Miguel recalled how he and Zoe first brought little Pablo home from the baby house. He was such a tiny thing, then grew stronger, grew up. The doctors turned out to be total amateurs. The child was perfectly healthy. He started walking and talking on time. He even began to chatter so much that later it was impossible to stop him. Everything in their family was good, if only Zoe hadn't gotten sick. At first, they thought it was nothing serious, but when the doctors figured it out, it was too late to do anything. Zoe passed away. And Miguel loved her so much. They had been together since school. Zoe had waited for him to come back from the army. They dreamed of a big, happy family. But the big family dream didn't come true. When Miguel was left alone with a child in his arms, such a profound melancholy overcame him. He even started drinking, got fired from his job, although he was a decent programmer. Marina, assessing the situation, immediately insisted on moving in with her. Miguel listened to her, and it seemed to gradually bring him back to himself. He returned to work. Yes, he understood that Pablo spent a lot of time alone. His mother was very ill, but they would manage. And then suddenly, this biological mother appeared, lying of course that she didn't abandon her son. Such thoughts were in Miguel's head when he caught up with the neighboring house. The man saw the whole ugly scene, how Paco was pushing his daughter into the car, how he yelled at Diana. And what exactly he yelled at her, Miguel couldn't believe that a father could talk about his own child like that. There was a moment when he wanted to go up and punch the bastard, but Paco had already driven away. Miguel walked up to Diana and extended his hand. "Diana, please calm down," he said. "Don't cry." Wiping away her tears, Diana was surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I was just passing by, saw your husband." "Yes, now I believe you. Someone like him can stoop to any low, not even blink an eye." "He's going to take Viola away from me," Diana sobbed. "I don't know what to do. First, you need to calm down, go home. Here's my phone number, dictate yours. I'll call you tonight." Miguel handed her a torn piece of paper from a notepad. He wrote down the phone number Diana dictated. "Please, don't cry. Believe me, as long as we're alive, everything can be fixed." He walked her to the entrance of the building and hurried off to work. For the rest of the day, Diana lay curled up on the couch, unable to sleep. She couldn't even stand up, her strength had left her. Several times, she dialed her daughter's number, but the phone was out of reach. And then, she received a call. "Darling," Diana shouted into the phone without looking. "I'm sorry, it's Miguel," she heard an embarrassed male voice. "Oh, it's you, sorry," Diana sighed, "I thought Viola was calling." "I'm outside your building, let's talk." "Yes, come in." Diana gave him the apartment number, and soon the guest was at the door. Diana shook herself a little and put the kettle on. "Your place is nice," Miguel noted as he looked around the apartment. "It's not my place," Diana answered sadly. "It belongs to Paco and he's kicking me out." Just like that. "I thought I would leave him myself, with the child, but he kicked me out and took her." "Do you have a place to go?" "To be honest, no. You know, I feel so sick, I don't want to live." "But you must live." "Diana, I was thinking all day at work about what you told me, what I saw today with my own eyes, and I realized one thing: don't fight fate. Let everything go as it is, and you'll see, everything will get better." "So you mean Paco will give me back my daughter?" "Never. But you still have a son. And you won't give him to me. On top of that, I am homeless. Now, you have someone to turn to for help." Diana didn't reply, just gave a sad smile. Yes, over the years Paco had done everything to make her alone and totally dependent on him. Miguel understood this without words. He thought about something for a bit, then shook his head decisively. Pack up. Where to? Diana was confused. You'll stay with us, Mom won't mind, Pablo will even be glad. You know, he's really attached to you. He comes back from walks and talks about how he played with you and your daughter. He's drawn to you. And I can't live without him anymore, Diana whispered, just like I can't live without Viola. Miguel didn't respond. Yes, he now saw before him a miserable young woman who had encountered a huge lie and betrayal in her life. How to help her, Miguel had little idea, but purely humanly, he couldn't not respond to her pain. Diana agreed to Miguel's offer, and within a couple of hours, she was leaving the apartment where she had created a cozy family nest for so many years. She turned back for a last look. Let everything stay and nothing is needed to be taken with her, only the essentials. The camera, yes, and photos of her daughter, and of course, she grabbed her documents. Marina, seeing a now familiar guest, was very surprised. She and Miguel were whispering in the kitchen, while Diana and Pablo were sitting in the living room. The boy was showing her his toys and books. Pablo was so happy. Where's Viola? Pablo remembered. Will she live with us too? No, Diana sighed. She's with Dad for now, but I hope we'll be able to see her soon. But for now, let's take a look at this book. She picked up an alphabet book, and she and Pablo began studying the letters. The boy already knew more than half. Good job, Pablo, Diana praised, completely impressed. A little more, and we'll be reading together. Yes, Pablo has a good memory, Diana heard Marina's voice behind her. Marina stood in the doorway, closely observing their guest interact with her grandson. Miguel had explained everything to Marina, who was thoroughly flustered. Why on earth had her son brought this woman home? She had abandoned her child and now was having second thoughts? Miguel did his best to clarify that Diana was the one who had been hurt. All right, son, let her stay, Marina finally agreed. Time will tell what comes of this. Now, as Marina watched Diana and Pablo, she noted how alike they were. Such an extraordinary story. Somewhere deep inside, hope stirred. Perhaps her son could form a bond with this Diana, who was not that much younger than him. They'd make a good pair, and Pablo would have a complete family. Diana gradually settled into her new environment. She quickly had Marina's apartment sparkling clean and cooked all sorts of delicious meals. The elderly woman appreciated her guest's efforts and hinted to her son, "Take a good look." Miguel pretended not to understand his mother. Pablo followed Diana around like a shadow, helping with the cleaning and the cooking. He even forgot about playing outside. He only ever asked about Viola. Diana felt a sharp pain in her heart whenever these questions came up, knowing nothing about the situation. Viola's phone was silent as always. Paco ignored her calls, and then she even saw Paco's car pull up to their house, with Marta stepping out from it. This infuriated Diana. Paco had insisted there was nothing going on with Marta, and yet here he was bringing her into his home. Diana confronted them. "What are you doing here?" Paco asked harshly, seeing Diana. "Where's my daughter?" She stood in their path. "That's none of your business," he replied. "I've already filed court documents. You'll receive a summons. The judge will decide the days when you can see your daughter. Yes, don't be surprised that I know where you live. Some kind people followed you. Just as I thought, you're a fallen woman. No sooner had you been left alone than you ran off to that man who's raising a kid. So, how's life with him?" "I'm a fallen woman?" Diana scoffed. "I don't bring lovers into my home, unlike you. I'm fallen. Just look at your companion." "Paco," Marta said. "What is she talking about?" Marta feigned indignation. In reality, she was ecstatic. Finally, Paco was hers. She had been pursuing him for so many years. Back then, in the maternity hospital, she was the first to whisper to Paco that his son was abnormal. She would tell him all sorts of horror stories. The doctors were cautious with their prognosis, but Marta detailed all the terrors of living with the diagnosis they had given the newborn. And so, Paco believed her and agreed to give up the child. Marta personally delivered the necessary paperwork from the doctor and managed to quietly resolve the whole situation. Marta's hope was that after all of this, Paco would leave his wife and come to her. She would give him a healthy child. But no, Paco stayed with his family, and this angered Marta. She decided to stay close to Paco regardless. She kept tabs on the boy, always emphasizing that even if the boy seemed healthy now, it meant nothing. The illness could manifest at any moment. And she constantly coddled Paco. In the beginning, he was like a rock, but even water can erode a stone. Regardless, Marta got her way, and everything worked out so conveniently. Now, Paco will definitely leave Diana. The only thing that slightly bothered Marta was the fact that Paco had taken his daughter. But she rationalized that let the court leave the girl with her father, then she would persuade Paco to send the girl to some elite boarding school. Let her live at a distance, they had just sent her there, after all. It was time to get used to it. And now, Diana had rushed up and was shouting something. "Paco, she's insulting me," Marta protested. Paco turned completely red. He even looked at Diana with fury. "Don't you dare say anything bad about Marta, and forget your way here. We'll soon be divorced and you can live a healthy life with your puppy. That puppy is also your son," Diana bitterly noted. "Though, how many times have I said that? Paco, I want you to hear me. I won't report to the police. I'll stay quiet about what happened in our family. But you will return Viola to me." "Return Viola?" Paco chuckled. "Right now. The daughter will live with me, and I don't care what you'll report to the police. I have such connections that they will instantly shut you up." Their conversation ended there. Paco and Marta arm in arm went to the entrance, and Diana watched them go. No, she wasn't crying, and she wasn't even angry. A grand plan had finally matured in her soul to destroy her husband. She didn't want to do this, no. But Diana had proposed a way for them to resolve everything calmly, and he did not want to. In the evening, she asked Miguel how good of a programmer he was. "I guess people don't complain," shrugged Miguel. "What's up?" "I want to dig into Paco's accounting at work. I think not everything there is clean. That is, I suspect double-entry bookkeeping." "Decided to take down your husband?" Miguel smiled. "He started this, not me," Diana responded thoughtfully. "He keeps yelling that I won't achieve justice in the prosecutor's office and in the police regarding the children. So, I'll take a different path. I need to delve into his accounting records and direct them to the tax office. Let them sort it out, and in the meantime, I'll turn to the magazine where I used to work. I'll offer them an exclusive interview about life with a man who loves no one but himself. Not even his own child. Well, I won't try to convince you otherwise. You're doing everything right." In the evening, Miguel managed to connect to the computer of Paco's company's chief accountant, as well as to his computer. And indeed, Diana was right. A substantial sum was going to fake accounts. Double-entry bookkeeping was being conducted. After copying all the data, Diana sent them to the tax office, and then she was met in the magazine's editorial office. "Daria, we're very sorry that you left our publication. You're a good photographer," said the chief editor. "I wouldn't mind coming back. But, as far as I remember, your husband was against you working. And that no longer matters. We're getting a divorce." "I was planning on talking about life with him," Diana explained. The editor was very surprised and initially seemed to refuse, but a few days later, news began to circulate on the internet that Paco was involved in some shady dealings. The tax authorities had begun an investigation. This invigorated the editor, and he remembered Diana's proposal. An exclusive piece was on the horizon. "Hello, have you reconsidered giving an interview?" The editor called Diana. "No, I'm available anytime you say," she responded readily. And so, the very next day, Diana was recounting her life with Paco about how he had cheated on her. "I know he's having big problems at work right now," Diana concluded. "That's not surprising. He always only thinks about himself." Apparently, his head was turned by the desire for gain. Yet, she didn't utter a single word about how Paco had deprived her of her child a few years ago. Miguel was surprised when he read the finished article in the magazine. "Why? I don't want them to drag my name and Pablo's name through the mud. Yes, all those responsible in that situation need to be punished, but right now it's more important to me that the court gives me Viola," Diana explained. The interview and the inspection at the firm were needed to show that his financial and moral standing is not as good as it seems. "You've played this cleverly," Miguel understood. "Now, they'll definitely give Viola to you. Do you know where she has been all this time, by the way?" "I do, she managed to call me. Paco put her in a private boarding school to keep her out of the way. That's how much he loves his daughter. Viola was crying and begging me to come get her. I promised her that we would meet soon." Diana fell silent for a moment, deep in thought. "I suppose I should start looking for an apartment for myself. Do you know if anyone is renting in your building?" "Why would you need that?" Miguel was surprised. "Well, if they give me Viola, and I'm sure they will, we'll need somewhere to live. We can't impose on you guys. Although, to be honest, I'm already having a hard time without Pablo." "No one needs to go anywhere," Marina's voice suddenly rang out. Apparently, she had been standing behind the door the whole time and had heard the entire conversation. "What? We can't all fit here? You're thinking of renting an apartment? Are you so wealthy? And what about Pablo? If one child fits, so will another." "Thank you," Diana smiled. "To be honest, I was hoping you would say exactly that." "What worries me is this," Miguel began. "You have a place to stay, but what about work? Paco still has more financial resources. Do you think I just casually gave that interview to the magazine?" Diana laughed. "They hired me and offered a decent salary. So I'm well prepared for the trial." Then came the divorce proceedings, and the court took everything into account. The latest developments at Paco's firm, his affair with another woman. In the end, Diana and Paco were divorced, leaving the daughter with her mother. Additionally, the court reviewed claims about property division, and Paco had to pay Diana almost half of everything. "She's just out for revenge," Marta shouted in the courtroom upon hearing the decision. "Because he put their child in an orphanage." "What child?" The judge was surprised. "Which orphanage?" Realizing she'd spilled too much, Marta tried to spout some nonsense, but eventually she broke down crying and told everything. "Diana, why didn't you mention anything about this story?" The judge asked sternly after listening to Marta. "You are the aggrieved party. I didn't want to stir this up. Why? My son is with me now, and you've given my daughter back to me. I don't want to take revenge on anyone. Life will set everything in its place. But now, the prosecutor's office will definitely deal with it," the judge replied. Marta screamed at this. Paco turned pale. "Fool!" he whispered to Marta, who started sobbing bitterly. After these hearings, some time passed, and Diana and Paco soon met again in court. Marta and other maternity hospital staff, including the chief physician, were there as well. They all looked visibly distressed, and for a good reason. In the end, the chief doctor was stripped of his position and given a suspended sentence of several years. Marta received a suspended sentence as well, while Paco managed to avoid criminal liability this time, having to compensate for Diana's moral damage. The sum turned out to be the exact price of their former apartment. Paco, now her ex-husband, didn't argue but simply handed over the property documents to her. After the trial, Paco had no choice but to load his remaining possessions into a car and leave town. Where to, no one knows. By the way, Marta refused to go anywhere. She's now trading cosmetics at the market. A few months later, Diana returned to her old nest with her children. Now, there were no traces left of their past lives. Miguel had made an effort and renovated the place, and now Miguel and Diana were together. It just naturally fell into place. They seemed to be just friends, and then, suddenly, love happened. And it was a kind of love that made Diana realize that these were the real feelings. They haven't yet told Pablo the whole truth and probably never will. Why should he know that he was once betrayed by the closest person to him? After all, he's still young and gradually forgetting that he once had a different mother. Diana is his favorite and the dearest, and Viola loves her brother very much. She missed her biological father a bit at first, but then it passed. Uncle Miguel is very nice and he loves Mom a lot. Marina is happy for everyone. Finally, her son is happy. There's one more person in this story who's pleased with the outcome. That's Roquelia Castro. The chief doctor was eventually punished. Diana and Roquelia still keep in touch. Now, Diana, with her husband and children, regularly visits Roquelia at her country house. They even helped to renovate the cottage. It's no palace, like Viola once dreamt of, but it's pretty nice nonetheless. And with the money that Diana received from Paco, she was able to open a small photo studio. Now, Diana is a well-known, in-demand photographer for various celebrations, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, weddings. Diana especially loves photographing weddings, when guests shout Gorko to the newlyweds. And from time to time, she'd whisper, "May you have the purest happiness."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.